Hi, it's Neil. Welcome again to the Vinyl Whisperer channel. Most record collectors think they're buying music, but if you own albums by the Rolling Stones, John Lennon, Blur, or the Velvet Underground, you may own works created by some of the best visual artists of the last 100 years. Today we're going to take a look at Andy Warhol, Salvador Dalí, even Banksy, and explore the hidden art collection that might be hiding on your record shelf. Let's talk about Andy Warhol, certainly one of the most influential artists of the last 100 years. When he first emerged on the art scene with his paintings of the Campbell's soup cans, people went bananas. But they also went bananas over his cover that he did for the Velvet Underground, which remains one of the more famous album covers in the world of vinyl. Andy did covers for a number of performers and artists, many for the Rolling Stones, also for John Lennon, Diana Ross, and also Aretha Franklin. He had a wide diversity of album covers that he tackled. Let's talk about probably his most famous album cover, though. It created quite a media buzz at the time, and that would be the Rolling Stones' Sticky Fingers album, which also had a workable zipper in the pants that are on the front cover. That album cover didn't sustain for long because the record label decided to go with a flat portrait instead of the workable zipper for two reasons. Number one, the expense of creating a workable zipper on an album cover. And number two, which is a little bit amusing, they got a lot of complaints that people using the zipper said it was actually damaging the record inside. Well, it's still a famous cover. Banksy might be the most famous and revered artist in the world right now. Recently, one of his works sold for $18 million at auction. But his work might not be out of reach for you. You might have something by Banksy in your collection. There was an album in 2003 by the group Blur that featured a cover done by Banksy. The album was called Think Tank. And the work on the cover appealed to Banksy as an assignment because it gave him a chance to bring his political satire and his belief that there are barriers stopping us from connecting with people, which is why the people on the cover are wearing those helmets. It's funny, he's kind of an anti-capitalism guy, and he was asked why he took on the assignment for such a commercial venture as a record album. And he said very simply, well, I do need to pay the bills, and I do agree with the group's messages, so that's why I did it. Well, you won't see any pictures of Banksy in this video because he's been completely anonymous for a long time now. In fact, there's considerable effort out there to try to uncover who is the real Banksy. So far, no strong leads on that. But you got to give Banksy a lot of credit. He is a guerrilla street artist from London, and he was able to elevate his graffiti style of work into the mainstream galleries around the world. Salvador Dalí's venture into album cover art is a story that's almost as surreal as the art he created in his lifetime. Believe it or not, Salvador Dalí was close friends with the late comedian Jackie Gleason. And Jackie Gleason, in addition to his comedy and role as Ralph Cramden on The Honeymooners, had a side business, and that was creating romantic mood music. He was a conductor and arranger, and he enjoyed creating those albums and putting them out. A lot of his fans online say his music was very relaxing, which is really secret code for elevator music. Nonetheless, he convinced his buddy Dalí to do an album cover for him, which Dalí agreed and created the cover for an album called Lonesome Echo. This is what Dalí actually commented about that cover. The first effect is that of anguish, of space, and of solitude. Secondly, the fragility of the wings of a butterfly, projecting long shadows of late afternoon, reverberates in the landscape like an echo. The feminine element, distant and isolated, forms a perfect triangle with the musical instrument and its other echo, the shell. Geez, you know what? That should have been obvious to me. If you think the collaboration between Salvador Dalí and Jackie Gleason was unusual, here's another one that's pretty unusual. Norman Rockwell was a beloved artist from the last century that specialized in paintings depicting everyday America, usually in a wholesome way. Rockwell would do paintings showing Thanksgiving dinner gatherings among families, Little League games going on across the country, all very wholesome topics. Well, how on earth did he get involved in painting a rock and roll album cover? That story comes from Al Kooper, a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he was also painted with his friend Mike Bloomfield. Cooper said one day he was sitting around in his living room on a Sunday afternoon watching an NFL game, and he was looking at the people that were with him, and he said to himself, boy, this seems like a Norman Rockwell painting. It's so wholesome, even though he was a rock star with long hair. Well, he took that idea and ran with it, went back to Columbia Records where he was employed, and he pitched the idea of Rockwell doing the cover for a new album they were going to have together, Mike Bloomfield and he doing blues music live. Well, to their surprise, Rockwell accepted this assignment, and he came to paint Mike Bloomfield and Al Kooper. And to Al Kooper's surprise, Mike Bloomfield was a huge fan of Norman Rockwell and couldn't control his gushing praise for having to meet Rockwell and be painted by him. Long story short, Rockwell said he really enjoyed the experience, and he called the album cover The Blues Singers. Well, it was a great album too. Live performances of great classic blues. And as a footnote, that was the very first recorded effort of Carlos Santana, who joined that album as a teenager to replace Mike Bloomfield when Mike was unavailable for a day of the recording. Well, after spending all that time talking about Warhol, Dali, and Banksy, and the artistic side of record collecting, it made me realize that most collectors are storing their albums on very crowded shelves or in crates. What if your collection could be a part of your decor in your home? Here's how I set up an attractive art gallery for less than $100. First of all, we start out with a 3-panel shelving from IKEA, which is nice and neutral. And then what we do, instead of having the records showing in a kind of an unattractive way in the shelf, you take and you buy a single record holder, which you can use to display any album of your choice. The beauty of this is that it constantly changes with your mood or your decor. One week I might have Van Dyke Parks. The next week I might want to have Jeff Beck. And another good part of this is the fact that this is very spousal friendly. You can collaborate with your spouse or your domestic partner in terms of what albums to display and get their input too. It's always changing. Well, that wraps it up for this episode of The Vinyl Whisperer, and we hope that you'll join us again.